Hey there. You're listening to True Story No Cap. Real stories, no exaggeration, no lies. Just the raw, unfiltered moments life throws our way. Relax, lean back, and let's get started. Well, there you go. Everything is fine with your child, the pediatrician said in a confident tone, examining the little one. The girl had just turned 2 months old, but she seemed to have already grown another couple of centimeters since the doctor's last visit. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of her mother's worries. Oh, thank God, the young mother exhaled with relief. Thank you for coming right away. As soon as I saw that rash, I started imagining all sorts of horrors. I didn't have time to think of everything. No need for extra worry. There's no need to make things up, the doctor said, checking the baby's arms and legs one last time. It's better to call me right away, otherwise you get nervous and you upset the child with your mood. They feel everything, even though they're still so tiny, aren't they? The pediatrician smiled at the baby and she cooed happily in response, as if confirming the doctor's words. Oh, what would we do here without you? The young mother said sincerely, placing a hand on her heart. How wonderful that they send such wonderful and caring specialists to us, even in such a remote place. The doctor didn't reply, just smiled politely in return and began packing her medical bag. The woman turned 35 this year, but she had been working and living in the Taiga settlement, lost deep within a distant region, for almost 2 years now. She had been allocated a small bright house and her own office in the local hospital, the only one for many dozens of kilometers around. Despite the fact that the pediatrician, being a native of the capital, was accustomed to completely different conditions in her work and daily life, the modest and even somewhat harsh life of the Siberian wilderness didn't frighten her at all. The woman found a certain special spirituality in such an existence, like the kind monks felt praying in their ascetic cells in ancient monasteries. Here, far from the city bustle, she felt she was in her rightful place. Doctor! Doctor, wait! The pediatrician heard a familiar voice behind her. A local resident, a good-natured blonde woman who worked on the farm, hurried towards her, carrying a large enamel can in her hands. She looked breathless but happy. Oh, please! You shouldn't run like that. You might fall, the doctor said, watching the woman rushing towards her. Yes, she just waved her hand brightly. What's going to happen to me? We're all used to it here, the local resident replied, catching her breath after the fast walk. Sometimes you rush to the cow at the crack of dawn, thinking, just let everything be all right with her, especially if she's expecting a calf. Doctor, I've brought you some fresh milk. We got an especially good yield today. The resident of the settlement held out the can to the doctor, her eyes shining with kindness. Oh, you shouldn't have. The doctor tried to refuse. However, the milkmaid was quite persistent. Take it, take it. She shook her head. You know how much of this good stuff I have at home, and you need it more, after all. You have such an important job. You treat our children, doing rounds from morning till night. For you, it's not just milk. We wouldn't begrudge you anything at all. Do you know what kind of doctor we had before you? The local resident almost spat on the ground in irritation, remembering the previous pediatrician. She basically didn't care about the children. All she did was come to the hospital to chatter, discuss all the gossip, smear her face with all sorts of cosmetics, and then, well, start flirting with our paramedic. Catherine hurried to take the can and thank the milkmaid. She felt that the local resident was about to get back on her favorite hobby horse. And so it happened. The story about the previous doctor and the local paramedic flowed like a river. But no matter what that goat did, the milkmaid continued ranting, no matter how she tried to charm him, our paramedic didn't notice her at all. You could have died trying. I understand, but I really must go. I still need to check a lot of documents at the hospital. However, the local resident was unstoppable. She couldn't calm down until she had expressed all her thoughts and feelings. Such was her broad, rural nature, unaccustomed to restraining emotions. Our paramedic is a bird of a completely different feather. He's that what's-his-name? The woman recalled the right word, pausing for a second. Ah, I remember. He needs a completely different kind of girl. The local resident looked at the pediatrician with cheerful cunning and finished. He needs to find a wife like you, quiet, calm, who dotes on children. The young pediatrician blushed, feeling herself turn red all the way to the roots of her hair. Please, you really shouldn't. Doctor, you should take a closer look at him. Ever since our paramedic lost his wife, he's been like a hermit for 5 years. The local contingent doesn't suit him. He came to us from the capital too, back in the day, the local resident added, not noticing the doctor's embarrassment. Catherine sincerely wanted to sink through the floor at that moment. Everyone, literally everyone in the settlement, was trying to match her with the local paramedic. The doctor didn't argue. He was a striking man, tall, broad-shouldered, with a dignified gait, and only 5 years older than her. However, despite the attention the paramedic himself showed her, Catherine didn't reciprocate his feelings. For her, the handsome widower colleague was just a pleasant co-worker who didn't evoke any feelings in the woman at all. And how could it be otherwise when another person had forever occupied a place in the young pediatrician's heart, her own husband? Catherine hurried to chase away the sad thoughts, especially since the modest building of their rural hospital, painted in beige and light gray tones, was already looming ahead. As she climbed the steps of the porch, the woman couldn't help but think how lucky she was that the local residents had welcomed her so warmly and friendly. It is known that not every newcomer, especially from the capital, is able to win the trust of villagers. Catherine, however, had managed to become practically one of their own. This was largely due to the fact that she was literally obsessed with her work. And now, upon entering her small, cozy office, the woman wanted to immediately start filling out some papers when her attention was drawn to a huge, lush bouquet standing on her desk. Someone had already put the flowers in a vase, so a wonderful, fresh scent filled the room. "No, not this again," flashed through Catherine's mind. "I've asked so many times." At that moment, there was a quiet knock at the door. "Doctor, knock, knock, may I come in?" The paramedic, flashing his perfect snow-white smile, slowly squeezed between the door and her office. "And good day to you." Catherine put on her usual polite smile. "I suppose these flowers are from you?" "Do you like them?" James asked. "I decided to cheer you up a little. Lately, you've been looking quite sad. Are you all right?" Catherine placed the can under the desk and exhaled firmly. "Couldn't be better. Only you shouldn't have spent so much." The woman shifted her gaze back to the bouquet. "Just wishing me a good day is enough?" "We've already discussed this, James. I am strictly against any signs of attention at the workplace. For that matter, outside of work too." James's smile faded slightly. However, the man was not going to give up without a fight. "You know, sometimes I think you're deliberately teasing me," the paramedic said, his face unchanged. "I just don't understand why you're doing this to me, honestly. I'm even starting to run out of ideas about what else I could do to please you." Catherine looked tiredly at the persistent suitor. "How much more? How else can I explain to you that there can be nothing personal between us? I understand it's hard for you to accept the fact that I don't want to date you, but let's face it. We just want different things from life. Our personalities don't match. What can you do?" The young doctor looked pleadingly at the paramedic. She had lost count of how many times she had tried to explain such seemingly elementary things to him. "Is it because you still love your husband?" The man asked her the painful question. James knew that Catherine didn't like to remember her past life in the capital, and yet he didn't miss an opportunity to remind her of the reasons for her move. The woman's face instantly became inscrutable. "Excuse me, but I'm really very busy right now. I'm afraid we have nothing more to talk about." "I understand your feelings like no one else," James said in a serious tone. "Believe me, I've been in your shoes. However, sooner or later you'll have to return to real life. Sometimes we just have to accept that the closest, dearest people leave. By letting go, you can finally look around you and see that there are people nearby who care about you. I will wait for you. I hope you will soon realize that you and I have every chance of creating a wonderful family." Catherine looked at the paramedic, her lips trembling and her eyes full of tears. "Please," the woman cried out pale, unable to contain her emotions, and then simply broke down sobbing, burying her head in her hands. "Cry, cry," James said softly, leaving her office. "Maybe tears will sober you up. How long can you keep pretending to be a steel lady?" The woman didn't answer him. She was simply unable to speak at the moment. So the paramedic had to leave her, finally leaving Catherine in the solitude she so desired. Her mood was irrevocably ruined. Catherine spent the rest of the day filling out the medical records of her little patients and their mothers, as well as seeing babies directly at the hospital. The young woman tried to behave as usual, friendly and polite. However, she felt a gnawing pain in her heart. The familiar, dull ache coupled with strong anxiety began to gradually fill her heart from the moment the paramedic forced her to remember her husband again. "My love," the young woman addressed him mentally every time she felt unbearably heavy-hearted. I believe we will meet again. Let others say whatever they want. Remind me however they please that you are surely no longer alive. I don't believe it. I don't believe it, and I never will. You are so strong, so brave. You couldn't just... In the evening, already preparing for bed, Catherine sat for a long time in front of the mirror looking at her face, drawn from heavy thoughts and worries. Who would have thought that in just 3 years, the young, once energetic woman would suddenly turn into someone withered by grief, whose gray hairs, shimmering like silver threads in her once perfect dark brown hair, made her look much older and more serious than she really was before. The young pediatrician loved to read before bed, not professional literature, but the most popular fiction she could get her hands on. Fortunately, in those days, living in the capital, the young woman had no shortage of books. Here, the most she could afford was the journal Medical Herald, and that was by subscription, which she had so prudently arranged at the post office the same day she moved to the settlement. No online store delivered books to such a distant and remote region. And to be completely honest, Catherine was no longer drawn to intricate detective stories or magical adventures in the romance novels she had once loved so much. The world had long since lost all its colors for her, and only her work somehow kept the woman afloat. By immersing herself completely in the problems of newborns and their young, and sometimes not so young, mothers, Catherine thus stifled her own pain, which stung her right in the center of her soul every time the woman remembered that she herself was unable to have children. Catherine got up from the table where the small mirror stood and caught a glimpse of how thin and unremarkable her figure had become. The expression that loneliness withers a woman in love described her perfectly during that difficult period of her life. She was lonely, and she loved. She loved with all her soul and all her heart, selflessly and boundlessly, the one and only person who was, most likely, no longer alive. But Catherine could not even entertain the thought of, as the paramedic put it, accepting and letting go. But despite all the darkest moments of her reflection, in that same heart where the persistent pain now surged, there was still a faint hope. A hope that lifted Catherine every morning and made her believe that one beautiful day she would still hear the familiar warm voice of her beloved husband. That night, the woman couldn't close her eyes. Her thoughts kept returning to her past, to those wonderful and easy years when she and her husband were truly happy, and nothing overshadowed their quiet family joy. They made great plans for the future and had no idea that all their hard-earned happiness could collapse in an instant. Catherine felt tears streaming down her cheeks again. "Oh my God," the woman whispered to herself. "My love, forgive me. I'm such a sentimental fool." Colorful images of the years spent with her husband involuntarily flashed before her inner eye again, gradually plunging the woman into a deep yet simultaneously beautiful and sad sleep, the kind the healer of children's ailments would have preferred not to see at all, so as not to become even more emotional after her inevitable awakening. Once, Catherine had a completely different life. The bright lights of the capital, work in one of the best clinics in the city, weekend meetings with friends and shopping trips to fashionable boutiques. All this was an integral part of the young doctor's daily life. She was born into a good, respected family of doctors. Her mother had worked in gynecology all her life, while her father was one of the leading surgeons in the capital. The young woman always had the example of her parents before her eyes. Strong, determined, they pushed through towards their goal and achieved everything themselves, thanks to their own hard work and natural talents, as well as the desire to constantly learn and develop in their chosen field. But besides all that, they also loved each other madly. Despite having lived together for almost 25 years, their daughter dreamed of continuing the noble dynasty of medics, choosing the field of pediatric medicine for herself. In this way, she was able to combine two of her passions in one profession, medicine and working with children. The young woman studied easily and with pleasure, and effortlessly graduated from medical school with honors, after which she almost immediately got a job at one of the best clinics in the city. From there, she gradually moved to an excellent private clinic, where she worked for the next few years, constantly improving her professional qualifications. She met her future husband when she was already an adult and self-sufficient young woman. She was 26 years old then. The young rescue service employee completely captivated her with his strength, masculinity, but at the same time his gentleness and kindness. She had never met such an understanding man as him. At that point, she had already had several unsuccessful romances and had become disillusioned with the opposite sex, intending to devote herself entirely to work. That year, she, along with a couple of other specialists from the clinic, was sent on a general quota for training in so-called survival courses, and it was there that the young woman first saw her future husband. The muscular, blonde instructor immediately made her heart beat faster. His neat, 3-day stubble looked so natural yet stylish that Catherine couldn't help but think to herself, was he perhaps taking special care of it to keep it in such an attractive state for all women? Being naturally shy, Catherine wasn't sure if this amazing young man would notice her, so she just continued her training, trying to focus on the main reason she had been sent there in the first place. What, you like our handsome instructor too? Her roommate in the dormitory for student employees who came for the courses, and incidentally a young gynecologist, teased her. And he's quite a guy, isn't he? Did you see how dignified he is? As if he knows that if he beckons love from us, we'll immediately fall for him. Oh, get out of here. Catherine brushed her off then, and felt a flush spread across her usually calm and clear face. What nonsense are you talking about again? He's handsome, of course, but nothing more. Aha, you were staring at him with wide eyes when he was giving that dummy artificial respiration, her friend joked. You probably imagined him doing the same thing to you? The roommate rolled her eyes dreamily. And Catherine just grimaced, wrinkling her charming nose. Ugh, you're a grown woman, but you're acting worse than a teenager, honestly. How disgusting. What's disgusting? Do you think if you act like a saint, he'll immediately pay attention to you? The roommate casually ran her fingers through her curly hair. You need to be bolder. Men nowadays don't value modesty in women anymore, but what's scientifically called initiative? Well, let others stick with their initiative. I'm a fan of more classic courtship methods, Catherine replied calmly. If we're meant to meet, he'll declare his intention first. And I, as a decent young woman, will then see if he's worth building a relationship with, or if he's just a frivolous man, in short. The roommate shook her head reproachfully. That's why the previous ones ran away from you, both of them, as fast as their legs could carry them. She concluded without malice. You're too picky, and you think too long before taking the first step. Look, there are many other beauties hanging around here besides us. They might get ahead of you. But I don't need him. Calm down. Catherine flared up, unable to bear it, but immediately felt her heart beat anxiously, as if she was already jealous of this instructor with some ephemeral other beauties her roommate had just told her about. All right, I'm quiet. She smiled and, turning over in her bed, added, Tomorrow is our final class. There it is, your chance. Use it or you'll miss your happiness again. Catherine didn't answer, just turned away to the wall. Her face was burning as if it had been rubbed with red pepper, and her heart was beating a gong in her chest, so that the young woman thought her roommate would hear this strange sound in the silence of the night room. For the first time since her last breakup, and perhaps ever in her life, Catherine felt such strong emotions towards a man she didn't know at all. What nonsense, the young woman scolded herself. You haven't even exchanged a word with him in these 2 weeks, and you're already listing him as your fiancé. Silly girl, go to sleep. Your roommate is right. Tomorrow is an important day, the last class, which you need to pass with flying colors. It's not like you came here for nothing, is it? With such anxious thoughts, the young woman fell asleep that night. Strangely enough, the next day passed completely calmly. Catherine passed her exam with a solid A and was preparing to go with the other young women to a creative evening organized for them by the base staff. Just as the young woman was meticulously examining herself in the mirror, trying to make sure her dress wasn't too short for such an event, there was a quiet knock at her door. Come in. Who is it? The young woman called out into the corridor, simultaneously adjusting the massive round silver earrings with enamel in her ears. Someone silently entered and stopped behind her. The young woman started, seeing a familiar but so unexpected reflection in the mirror. Is that you? Oh my, you startled me, Catherine exclaimed, turning around. Standing before her was the very instructor she had been thinking about so often in the past few days. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. The guy flustered and shyly lowered his stunning blue eyes. In his hand, he held a small bouquet of wildflowers, which he shyly extended to the young woman. Here, these are for you. I'm sorry, I didn't know what flowers you prefer, but the nature here is amazing, so I thought maybe the local flora would please you. Catherine looked up at him, her dark gray eyes wide with surprise. A delicate blush gradually spread across the young man's face, just like the one that must have appeared on her skin at that moment. Oh, how kind, Catherine said, accepting the bouquet from him. These are truly beautiful flowers, better than any roses, really. A timid hope lit up in the young man's eyes. I was thinking, Maybe you wouldn't mind going to the dance with me? We're having something like a disco at the end of the evening. It's funny, of course, grown men dancing to pop tunes, but still, I've been watching you since last week. Excuse my frankness, but I really liked you, so I would very much like you to do me the honor of spending this evening with me as my companion. Catherine was speechless with delight for the first minute. To think the outwardly stern rescuer turned out to be such a gentle and sensitive person. Truly, you never know what's hidden behind the facade of male brutality and outward calm. The young man, it turned out, had been tormented by the exact same feelings as her all this time. Of course, I will do you that honor, the young woman replied playfully and smiled sweetly at her chosen one. Only promise me you won't smoke much. You know, there's nothing worse than a partner who has been smoking before a dance. I just can't stand cigarette smoke. A bright and pleasant smile lit up the young man's face. Oh, that wish I can easily fulfill, the young man said, imitating a fairy tale genie, for I have never smoked and don't plan to start, so I obey. The guy folded his hands in the characteristic genie gesture and bowed slightly. Catherine, at that second, didn't know where to hide herself from embarrassment. Oh my, forgive me that tactlessness, the young woman exclaimed. I should have guessed that many of your colleagues lead a healthy lifestyle. It's just that both my previous admirers weren't averse to indulging in a cigarette from time to time, and I suffered terribly from it afterwards. Catherine looked into the young man's blue eyes and bit her tongue. What possessed her to mention past men? But today, the emergency service employee took her words with understanding. He seemed completely unbothered by the mention of the young woman's past romances. Offering her his elbow, he, like a true gentleman, escorted her directly to the local community center, where the rescue service employees had already prepared a wonderful concert for all the students with jokes, poems, and even songs of their own composition. Catherine particularly liked the latter, and they made a great impression on her. That evening the young woman heard a real bard song for the first time. Thank you for this wonderful evening, she thanked her companion when the dancing ended and they, walking slowly under the blooming apple trees, reached the women's dormitory. I haven't felt so free perhaps, in a very long time. It was so easy to get away from everyday worries and the omnipresent hustle here. Yes, the young man agreed, drawing out the word. I've always felt that this place has some special energy of its own. It's nothing special, just an ordinary base near Moscow, but as soon as you drive a few kilometers from the capital, it feels like a completely different world around you. No high-rises, no shopping centers at every turn. Just a calm and measured life, where everyone can find their true place. Catherine looked at the young man and couldn't believe her happiness. Here he was, a person who understood her inner state like no one else. No matter how much she loved the capital with its frantic pace of life, the bright, sometimes garish shop windows of ubiquitous cafes and stores, only here, many kilometers away from the city, did she truly feel what life was. It was as if all her senses were instantly heightened, giving her a kind of secret, yet at the same time so simple knowledge. Everyone has their true purpose, you just have to follow it in the call of your heart, and then harmony and grace will surely come into your life. Tell me, can we see each other again? Don't think I'm being presumptuous. It's just that I feel something good could come of this between us. The young man looked at her unexpectedly seriously. Of course, the young woman assured him calmly. Let's exchange phone numbers. I'll write to you as soon as I get back to the capital. A joyful and slightly childlike smile appeared on the young man's face, and Catherine's heart immediately fluttered, warmed by the light feeling beginning to blossom in her soul. Upon returning to the capital, Catherine thought a lot about what this amazing trip had given her. Should she write first, or was it better to wait until he was free and made the first move himself? The young woman's doubts vanished when a few days later she received the following message on her phone. I'll be in the capital in a few days. Want to meet? Without thinking for a second and trembling all over with joy, Catherine immediately replied, Yes, I'll be waiting impatiently. In response, the young woman received a playful smiley face, after which she exhaled with relief. It seemed a new phase was beginning in her life. The first date was followed by several more, and soon the relationship between the young people became truly serious. It seemed they couldn't spend a single day apart. They constantly texted, called, and sent each other sweet postcards, just like young students who had just tasted true love for the first time. Less than 6 months later, the young man proposed to Catherine. The young woman, of course, agreed, promising the young rescuer that she would make him the happiest man in the world. I'm the one who should be promising you such things, silly girl, the pleasantly surprised fiancé said to his bride. Remember, a man's duty is to take care of his woman and give her only love and joy, but also to protect her. You will never regret becoming my wife. Catherine's parents approved of their daughter's choice. The fiancé inspired confidence and said normal, sensible things. And after talking with the young woman's father, he became like family to them. Although I grew up in an orphanage, the guy honestly admitted to them, I fully understand what a real family should be like. Your daughter told me a lot about your relationship with her mother. If I can come even a little close to something like that in my marriage with your daughter, I will be simply happy. It's good that you intend to make my daughter happy, the bride's father told him. But what about the fact that your job is dangerous? You might leave my daughter alone one day. And what then? The young man was not at all embarrassed by such a question. All safety measures for transport and equipment are in place at our base. Monthly diagnostics are performed, and in case of any damage, parts or technically important components are immediately replaced. He spoke to the bride's father as if reporting on the state of a service facility to his superior, clearly, distinctly, so that the man would have no doubt that his work, although involving risk to life, was equipped with everything necessary to avoid that very risk. As for Catherine's mother, she accepted her future son-in-law as if he were her own son. The woman worried that the fiancé, having grown up in an orphanage, hadn't received enough maternal warmth in childhood, and so she tried to feed the young man homemade pastries or hot, rich soup at every opportunity. Here, try this, the mother would say, pouring the guy a bowl of her signature cabbage soup. I made it especially for you. I just felt you and my daughter would stop by today. The fiancé felt awkward refusing, although his future mother-in-law's soup seemed a bit heavy for him. Thanking the mother for the treat, he at the same time glanced laughingly at his fiancée, who also understood everything but couldn't stop her mother's fit of kindness. You've probably never tasted cabbage soup like this before, the mother continued, fussing around the young man. My daughter knows how to cook it too, just don't forget to remind her more often, because with her work lately, all she does is eat on the go. And she won't be able to do that now, after all. She's getting married, she'll have to feed him properly now and eat well herself, so that you can have a healthy baby soon. Mom! Catherine couldn't help but exclaim, blushing like a boiled lobster. That's enough. What baby? We're not even married yet. The registration is only in a month. Anyway, we wanted to live for ourselves a little first, and only then think about children. An awkward silence hung in the air. The fiancé looked meaningfully first at his fiancée, and then shifted his gaze to the disappointed faces of her parents. A little? How long roughly will that be? The mother asked with sadness in her voice. I hope you won't become one of those modern couples who think it's better to get 3 cats, a dog, and a parrot than to have a couple of healthy children. You're not like that, are you? What are you talking about? No, of course not, Catherine exclaimed immediately. And how could you even think such a thing? We are perfectly normal people, and we will definitely have children, just not so quickly. I want to work a little more, after all, to realize myself first as a specialist. Darling, but nothing prevents you from simultaneously pursuing your interests in pediatrics and being a mother, her father reasonably remarked. We are no longer young and would like to spend time with grandchildren while we still have the strength. My daughter only means to say, the fiancé unexpectedly joined the conversation, that she and I have decided to wait a year or two until we are absolutely sure we are ready for a baby in our family. No one is saying we want to take away the joy of spending time with grandchildren, he reassured his future father-in-law. Well, if it's about that time frame, then fine, the father-in-law replied, chewing his lips. So be it. Live for yourselves for now. Just don't drag it out, okay? After all, your daughter is already at the most suitable age. You never know what complications might arise during pregnancy if she wants to give birth after 30. Catherine squeezed the spoon with all her might. However much she loved her parents, such anxiety about her condition and the possibility of having children caused her slight panic. The young woman had always known she wanted to be a mother, but she wanted to decide for herself at what age and how exactly it would happen. Her father and mother, however, constantly pressured her, frightening her by saying that her childbearing age had, in their opinion, already crossed all reasonable boundaries. Catherine still had fresh memories of how upset her mother was when she broke up with her last admirer. Or rather, the true reason for her upset was not her daughter's personal tragedy, but the fact that she hadn't thought to get pregnant by the guy, so that, as her mother put it then, she could have a child for herself and thus close the painful issue in their family. Catherine felt her fiancé squeeze her other hand under the table. His look seemed to say to the young woman, "Calm down. This changes nothing. We will still do what we want." Catherine smiled at her fiancé and thought again how lucky she was to have met a person who truly understood her. The wedding was modest. From the groom's side, there were only a few of his best friends from the squad. From the bride's side, friends, relatives, and a couple of her father's good acquaintances specially invited from the ministry. The young couple decided specifically not to have a lavish celebration. They planned to use part of the money saved on the down payment for a mortgage. The young couple dreamed of their own apartment, as Catherine had been living with her parents all this time, and the fiancé was living in a rented apartment. However, the parents gave the couple a truly royal wedding gift. "Here," the bride's father said to the groom, handing him the keys to a brand new apartment. "A 2-room apartment in the very center. There's a metro nearby. 10 minutes, and our daughter can get to the clinic without traffic jams. And you'll also have a chance to shorten your commute to work a little." The fiancé didn't know how to thank his father-in-law, and so he just hugged him tightly. "Thank you," the fiancé said sincerely. "If you only knew how grateful we are." "It's nothing," the bride's father waved it off. "I'm doing this primarily for my daughter, so she can live more comfortably. You take care of her and don't forget about the grandchildren. Your mother and I will be waiting impatiently." The elderly surgeon reminded his son-in-law, then playfully wagged his finger at him. Catherine, learning that she and her husband would now have their own apartment, squealed with delight and threw her arms around her father's neck. "My beloved daddy," the young woman said, tirelessly kissing her father's cheek. "You're the best, my dearest. How did you and Mom manage it?" "Well, we saved up a little, I won't deny it," the father said, blushing with joy for his daughter. "Your mother and I decided to prepare a family nest for you in advance. We're not animals. We know how hard it is for young people to earn their own housing these days." The young couple felt like the happiest people in the world at that moment. They looked confidently into the future and believed that a long and wonderful family life awaited them. The first 2 years flew by for the young family like a single moment. Catherine worked at the clinic all the time, and in the evenings she turned into a desperate housewife, constantly cooking something delicious and unusual to please her husband, who returned late in the evening from his dangerous service. Her husband was constantly on call. In all sorts of extreme situations he had to be. Catherine, of course, worried about her husband with all her heart and waited for his call with a sinking heart every time. However, God was merciful. Everything was fine. Despite the fact that her husband had to pull people out from under rubble and chase away lingering fishermen from a half-melted pond and much more, and then a joyful event happened in their family. One evening, when her husband returned from work, Catherine met him with eyes burning with happiness and cunning. "What is it, my dear? What happened?" her husband asked his beloved wife. "I have a surprise for you," Catherine confided and pulled him into the living room. There, on an exquisitely set table, a festive dinner awaited her husband, such as he hadn't received from his wife in a long time. In the center, on a huge porcelain platter with painting, a large chicken-baked French style and wine awaited him. Nearby in a saucepan lay boiled sweet potatoes with rhubarb and the freshest seafood, which Catherine had prudently arranged on a separate dish. And on the other side of the table, in a tall vase, were appetizing fruits, and next to them stood a bottle of excellent wine and, for some reason, a carton of orange juice. "Wow," her husband sincerely admired. "What occasion is this celebration for?" The man kissed his wife and looked at her questioningly. "Did you get a promotion?" "Well," Catherine replied evasively, "you could say that. Only not the kind of promotion you're thinking of." "Oh, interesting," the intrigued husband said, after which his wife sent him to wash his hands, and she managed to lay out clean napkins. She really wanted this evening to be memorable for them, and for that, everything had to look simply perfect. "So what's the surprise?" her husband asked a little later, when she had seated him at the table and placed steaming chicken on his plate. "I'm so impatient. I want to know." The husband playfully clinked his fork and knife, showing that he was very hungry and waiting for his wife's answer. "I'll tell you everything now, but first, please open the juice and the wine. I can have—" Her husband's face at first didn't understand his wife's hint, and calmly began unscrewing the wine cork with a corkscrew, when it suddenly dawned on him. "Wait, why do you specifically want juice?" Catherine tried unsuccessfully to suppress a smile. She felt herself starting to blush again. She covered her mouth with her hand and looked at her husband eloquently. "Are you saying you're pregnant?" her husband asked softly. Catherine lowered her eyes, then nodded affirmatively. Oh my God, my dear, we're going to have a baby. My darling, my sunshine. What happiness. I'm going to be a father, do you understand? A father. Her husband almost dropped the bottle, trying to jump out of his chair and hug his wife. When he succeeded, he twirled Catherine in a joyful waltz. The young woman laughed and didn't take her eyes off her beloved husband for a minute. Oh, how much we have to do now, the man, excited by the happiness of fatherhood, said hastily. And we need to decide where the nursery will be. Choose a crib. Have you told your parents yet? Not yet, his wife replied, shaking her lush hair and not stopping laughing. We'll tell them together when we go to Mom and Dad's next weekend. Her husband nodded understandingly. My God, I thought this was happiness. A loving wife and a hot dinner every day, a reliable rear, support. But this is something completely different. How I love you, my dear. How I love you. Exciting, but such wonderful, everyday life began for the couple. Everything seemed to remain as before, but now every evening they did things together that all future parents do. Together they chose a stroller for the baby, dreamed of how they would paint the wall where they would place the baby's crib, argued about whether they would have a boy or a girl, and what name they would give their future baby. One day, when Catherine was already 3 months pregnant, she and her husband decided to spend their day off culturally, and so they went to the theater. A new play was being staged there, and she really wanted to see it. The performance struck the young woman with its sets and the power of the actor's performance. The evening promised to be completely unforgettable, as after the theater, her husband suggested stopping by a restaurant as well. But after such a 3-hour spectacle, you and I definitely need to eat something unusual, her husband said happily to his wife as they left the theater. You must be terribly tired. I would be a terrible husband if I made you cook something at home after all this. No, let's go. Let's eat somewhere nice. If you do that, you'll be the perfect husband, Catherine agreed. Honestly, I'm ready to eat an elephant right now, or at least a hippopotamus. Those tiny sandwiches in the theater buffet didn't impress me at all. Dinner was magnificent. Catherine was already preparing to remember this evening as one of the most beautiful in their life together when something completely unthinkable happened. The couple was already heading out to the parking lot. Her husband had called a taxi and it was due any minute, when their path was blocked by 3 unfamiliar men. Judging by their dilated pupils and strong smell, these guys were clearly under the influence of alcohol or some other substances, and the hands of all 3 were covered with tattoos that looked bluish in the autumn twilight. Hey guys, one of them shouted to the others, and the whole company instantly began to scrutinize the couple. Her husband immediately understood what was happening and raised his hands peaceably. Hey guys, don't worry. Let's part ways peacefully. We don't need any trouble. Here. The rescuer took out his wallet from the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out all the cash he had. Everything I have, guys, really. Take it. Go with God. My wife and I just want to go home, that's all, her husband said as calmly as possible. However, Catherine, frozen in terror at that moment, felt with every cell of her body how tense her husband was. The tallest of the trio, and obviously the leader of this gang, glanced evaluatingly at the small amount his husband offered him. Then he took a couple of steps toward the husband and snatched the money from his hands with a quick movement. Like a monkey that had found a new toy at the bottom of its cage, the man happily jumped in front of his henchmen. Look, guys. He waved the bills in front of their faces. People are understanding these days. Well, I like it, the second one drawled in a nasty voice, and then out of nowhere, stared intently at the pregnant woman. No fight, no chick for a quick one. A bald, plump man slowly stepped towards the wife. Oh, this woman is quite something, in my opinion, the scoundrel said. Juicy. Her husband instantly shielded his wife, and Catherine felt her mouth go suddenly dry. A second later, a nasty sour lump rose from somewhere in her throat, making the woman instinctively grab her belly, where the life of her little child was beginning. Fear, disgusting animal fear for her husband's life and their unborn son or daughter. That's what Catherine felt at that moment. She pressed herself against her husband's back, closing her eyes for a second. Don't come near her, her husband threw in his face and immediately took a fighting stance. One move, you can say goodbye to your worthless life. Well, I'll be. This pampered piece can even talk. The third criminal, who was quite muscular, replied instead of his comrade. Try saying that again. With these words, the villain pulled out a gleaming folding blade from inside his jacket, suspiciously resembling a razor. What? Not so brave now, are you? The fat man guessed, pointing at his friend's hand. My buddies and I will quickly clean up your face so you know how to talk to respectable people, and your chick is coming with us. Don't worry, it's not far at all, just to the nearest bushes." All three laughed like old hyenas. Her husband seemed to turn to stone, completely ready for a deadly lunge. "When I say so, just run. Don't look back," her husband whispered to his wife over his shoulder. "No, I'm staying here with you," Catherine whimpered plaintively into his jacket. "What are you doing, Bunny? Come out to the big guys." The fat man continued cooing meanwhile. "The guys really want to play with you. They want to so much that they're going to finish off your boyfriend right now." Hardly had he finished speaking, all three rushed at her husband. "Run!" her husband shouted to his wife and immediately engaged in an unequal fight with the three ghouls. He began to deliver chaotic kicks and punches, trying to drive the attackers away from him. The man couldn't execute a single grapple, as he risked slowing down too much, which would have been a fatal loss for him. Catherine darted somewhere to the right, hoping to get around the brute with the razor. However, he was quick-witted and immediately delivered a powerful blow to the woman's stomach. "Where are you running off to, Otter?" the man hissed and grabbed Catherine by the hair, pulling her towards him. The woman first felt a terrible stench from his breath, and then the cold blade pressed against her tender neck. "My love," she cried out, and her husband immediately lost his guard, taking a crushing blow to the jaw and falling to his knees. "No, oh," Catherine cried out in a fit of despair and kicked the villain in the groin with all her might. Despite the pain in her stomach, she couldn't let the criminals finish off her husband like this, before her eyes. "Beat him up, guys," the tall guy shouted, and he and the fat man began kicking her husband in the stomach and head. Catherine managed to break free from the brute's deadly grip for a second. However, he managed to slash her chest with the razor. Lowering her head to it, the young woman saw a crimson stream soaking her light-colored dress. "Come here," the villain growled, and with a short, precise thrust, plunged the weapon right into Catherine's stomach. The surrounding world instantly turned into one large blurry spot for the woman. The pain was so unbearable that Catherine forgot how to breathe. Whispering her husband's name one last time, she fell and plunged into pitch darkness. With the edge of her consciousness, Catherine managed to catch the wail of police sirens. Apparently, the restaurant staff had finally heard the noise in the backyard and called the police. Along with the police came an ambulance, but the woman no longer saw this. Sticky, cold darkness surrounded her from all sides. My dear, can you hear me, my dear? It's me, your husband." With immense difficulty, Catherine opened her eyes. Above her was a perfectly white ceiling, which at first even blinded the woman with its light. Next to her, Catherine heard a nasty beeping sound. Special medical devices were monitoring her condition. The woman felt a long plastic tube inserted in her nose, through which cool air was flowing. Then she felt someone gently and tenderly squeezing her hand. "My love," she said very weakly, "is it really you, alive?" Her husband's face leaning over her confirmed it. "It's me, tough guy. Thank God. But you really scared me, my dear. I thought I had lost you." It took Catherine exactly half a second to remember all the events that preceded her stay in the hospital. "The baby," the young woman exclaimed in a pale voice and immediately pressed her hand to her stomach. It was completely flat and tightly bandaged. "Our baby, my love. What happened to him?" Catherine asked her husband, already sensing the worst. The man just lowered his eyes in response, then nervously ruffled his hair. "The doctors fought for your life for so long, they had no choice. Our baby couldn't be saved anyway. I'm so sorry, my dear, so sorry." "No, no way. It can't be." Catherine broke into hysterics. Just then, the attending physician rushed into the room. "What have you done?" The elderly surgeon looked angrily at the husband, simultaneously trying to restrain the woman who was thrashing in convulsions. "Who gave you permission to give the patient such news when she herself is on the brink of death? Leave the room immediately. Nurse, bring me a sedative quickly." The doctor addressed the nurse, who rushed in at the same second. "It's better to tell her right away," the husband said grimly, getting up from the chair with difficulty. "It would have been even more painful later." The surgeon looked at him, then shook his head sternly. "I understand everything. You're both in shock. But that didn't give you the right to risk your wife's health like that." The husband seemed to have let the surgeon's words go in one ear and out the other. He looked at his sobbing wife with a sense of absolute hopelessness. His beloved was near death and had also lost their child, and he, an employee of the rescue service, couldn't prevent it. "My dear, I'll come back tomorrow. the husband said with tears in his eyes and left the room. The hardest part for Catherine was yet to come. After a long and painful recovery, the doctor delivered the grim verdict. Due to the injuries sustained, she would never be able to have children again. The young woman was absolutely crushed. Upon returning home, Catherine didn't remember what was happening around her at those moments. All the days blurred into one endless gray streak. Her husband tried to reach his wife somehow, to shake her out of this comatose state, but it was all in vain. Her parents, no less depressed by their daughter's condition than her husband, also tried to talk to her from their side. However, she didn't react to anything at all. No one but her husband and family knew how hard it was for Catherine to get up every morning to return to even a semblance of herself. Only after almost a year was she able to consciously perceive the reality around her again. The pain of losing the child was still too fresh to completely forget what she had experienced, and the woman's abdomen now bore the indelible marks of that monstrous evening, scars. Catherine hid them under dark and thick clothing. She could no longer wear a swimsuit or a light summer dress. She constantly felt that strangers would stare at her terrible cuts. Even with her husband, she now behaved coldly and reservedly, and she didn't blame him for what happened in any way, but she knew what torment he himself must have been experiencing, and therefore no longer considered expressions of their love appropriate, at least not until this whole story finally dissolved into the everyday flow of continuing life. To recover and distract herself from the inconsolable grief, Catherine returned to work. Despite the fact that it was unbearably painful for her to look at other people's children every day, the woman increasingly caught herself thinking that it was slowly, little by little, becoming easier for her. The pain was very slowly, but surely receding somewhere deep into her soul, leaving behind only a calmness bordering on indifference. For a start, this was a salvation for Catherine. And then, when she seemed to have just found firm ground under her feet, her whole world shattered into tiny particles from which she could no longer gather anything. This happened exactly 3 years ago, a year before Catherine finally moved to the settlement. Her husband had gone on a business trip somewhere to the north, to a distant region. Terrible fires raged there that year, and her husband was called along with other rescue service employees to extinguish the fire from helicopters by dropping a special fire-suppressing suspension. The most terrible thing Catherine blamed herself for ever since was that she felt absolutely nothing, calmly letting her beloved husband, her only family, go on that cursed business trip. 2 days after her husband left, she received a call from an unknown number. "Ah, is that you?" an unfamiliar male voice said on the phone. "Yes, it's me. Who am I speaking with?" "This is the captain of the emergency response team. Your husband?" Catherine's heart immediately dropped somewhere into her stomach. It became difficult not just to speak, but simply to think. "Yes," the woman replied barely audibly. "Be strong. Your husband died heroically while fighting a fire in the forest belt." Catherine felt as if the floor beneath her was slowly moving away. Grabbing the edge of the table to keep from falling, she asked again, "What do you mean, died? No, there must be some mistake. He only flew away 2 days ago. I'm very sorry," the captain said a little more softly. "Your husband's helicopter got into a difficult situation. One of its blades failed, after which the entire aircraft crashed into the river. We found the body of one of the pilots immediately, but your husband, he was probably carried downstream by the current. Our divers are already searching the entire area there." Something inside Catherine gave a weak twitch. Perhaps it was the last strands of her nerves. "Wait. Are you saying the body hasn't been found? But that could mean he had a chance? Maybe he's still alive. Maybe he was washed ashore somewhere and needs help?" A sad sigh was heard on the other end of the line. "If only it were that simple," the captain replied. "They fell from a considerable height there, plus the damage to the helicopter was such that, in short, if I were you, I wouldn't have any particular illusions. But our team is doing everything necessary now to search that entire area as effectively as possible." Catherine replied to the captain coldly and resolutely. "Fortunately, Captain, you are not in my place and are unlikely to ever be. I will come on the first available flight. I want to personally participate in the search for my husband." "Oh, please, you don't need all this, honestly," the captain warned her paternally. However, the rescuer's wife was a straightforward person when it came to preserving her family. "Let me decide for myself what I should and shouldn't do, Captain. Give me the address. I'll come." Warning her parents and superiors, the woman set off into the heart of the taiga. Along with the members of the search and rescue team, she scoured the forest there back and forth, but alas, she found no trace of her husband. "I told you that you're just upsetting yourself for nothing," the captain complained about Catherine's arrival. "We didn't achieve anything, really." "No," Catherine said firmly. "My husband will be considered missing until you find his body. Only then will I accept that he is dead. Until then, you must continue the search for as long as possible." The exhausted Catherine returned to the capital, and the search for her husband continued for several more months. However, it was all in vain. Finally, the woman came to a difficult decision: to leave everything in the capital and move permanently to a remote taiga settlement. These places turned out to be just that. "Daughter, my dear, rethink this." Her mother, depressed by the whole situation, pleaded with her. "I understand that the grief of loss will stay with you forever in your heart, but you want to leave not only your job and home, you want to leave us too." Catherine's elderly mother held back tears with her last strength. "Mom, forgive me, but this is the only thing I truly need right now," Catherine explained to her. "I can't stay here anymore. Everything reminds me of him and how much we had together, how much connected us, and how much we lost." Her mother looked at her daughter with an attentive, understanding gaze. "Promise me you'll at least write," her mother asked pleadingly. "Of course, Mommy, my dearest," her daughter assured her, hugging the elderly woman. "As soon as I get settled, I'll write right away. I've already arranged with the local hospital. They're taking me right away from my specialty. Can you imagine? The staff there is very small, only about 10 people, so there's no need to fear rumors about me." "Oh, my dear, rumors are such a disease," her mother said, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. "Even if you don't want them, they'll appear out of thin air. You're a new person to them, so at first they won't trust you. They'll be watching you. Be patient for a bit. Maybe you'll fit into their way of life. Just write to me, my dear. Don't forget about your mother and father." Catherine hugged her mother tenderly and promised her that everything would definitely be all right. The next morning, she was already sitting on a plane taking her to distant, unknown Siberian lands. When Catherine woke up the next morning after a difficult night filled with dreams mixed with memories, her head ached so much that the woman didn't know what to do with herself. After taking 2 pain pills, she somehow made her way to her medical station, hoping that the fresh air and the scent of forest herbs would cheer her up a little. However, no sooner had the woman delved into her documents than the milkmaid burst into her office. "Doctor, doctor, help! You're our only hope left," the local resident said, breathless from running. "What is it? Calm down, catch your breath. Should I get you some water?" "No time." The blonde, plump woman waved her hand at her. "Get ready." "Where?" Catherine didn't understand. "Daisy, the shaman's granddaughter, is very ill. I was at their place the other day in the forest." The local resident vaguely gestured around her. "Little Daisy was already, you could say, wasting away before my eyes back then. And this morning I brought them milk, and the shaman instructed me, saying, 'Call your doctor here, my potions aren't helping.'" Catherine had heard something about the local hermit shaman out of the corner of her ear. The elderly woman, rumored to be over 100, rarely appeared in the village, preferring to buy groceries and goods through local residents. Catherine didn't approve of the women going to the shaman, but she couldn't do anything about it. They had been accustomed since childhood to consulting her on all matters related to women's affairs. The only thing Catherine hoped for was that they would be smart enough not to entrust their lives and the lives of their young children to the midwife. Not long ago, however, a rumor spread in the village that the shaman had a granddaughter, but no matter how hard Catherine herself tried to reach her to check on the baby, she could never find the old witch's forest hut, and the shaman's daughter flatly refused to visit doctors. She and her grandmother, Catherine, understood, were fundamentally against modern technology and medicine. "But they've ruined the child with their herbs," Catherine exclaimed agitatedly and immediately began preparing for the journey. "How old is this Daisy, anyway?" The local resident thought for a minute. "She seems very young, a year at most." "Even better," Catherine said, shaking her head. "Can you take me that way to the shaman's place? Every time I go there, I get lost." The local resident looked at Catherine somewhat strangely, then muttered quietly, "Strange. Somewhere?" "Interesting," the milkmaid replied louder. "All right. Just follow me closely. The area is swampy. It's easy to stumble." Half an hour later, the 2 women were walking through the impenetrable forest thicket. The local resident walked easily and briskly, almost flying over snags and sharp branches that seemed to avoid the village woman. For Catherine, this journey turned into a real hell. By the time they reached the forest edge where the neat hut stood, Catherine felt completely drained and also scratched all over by the local trees and bushes. "Here we are," the local resident said contentedly, pointing to the shaman's house. "With your permission, I'll go home. I still have 1,000 chores to do around the house." "Of course, go," Catherine nodded at the milkmaid. "Thank you for your help. It's amazing how I couldn't find their house all this time. It seems like it's not a long walk at all, but every time I seem to get lost." The local resident glanced at Catherine slightly suspiciously. Who knows why the old witch didn't let her into her house, the milkmaid thought on her way back. It means she thought it was necessary. Maybe she felt some competition from her, after all. The pediatrician was a doctor, and a real one at that. The shaman and her daughter never liked doctors. Catherine, left alone, hurried up to the porch of the hut and gently knocked on the slightly ajar door. No one answered Catherine. Then she decided to enter herself without an invitation. The atmosphere inside was as mystical as could be, as if Catherine had stepped into Baba Yaga's hut. Bunches of various herbs hung everywhere, jars with incomprehensible concoctions stood around, and there was a sharp scent of juniper and spruce needles. The young woman walked into the living room, hoping that the sick child was lying somewhere here. The room was quite ascetic, an old oak table, a couple of chairs, a kerosene lamp, a chest of drawers, and a couple of framed photographs. One of them depicted a young woman in a sundress-like dress, similar to those in which the Maslenitsa effigy is burned in the spring. She stood embracing a very old, wrinkled woman, as if she were a dried olive. Apparently, these were the shaman and her daughter. My God, how old is the daughter then? Catherine thought to herself in surprise. If it's true that her mother is 100, then this woman is definitely a witch, and she even managed to give birth to a child. Catherine put the photograph back in its place and looked at the second picture, and that's when something inside her just snapped. "What did you come for?" A croaking old voice sounded behind Catherine. "If I had my way, you'd still be wandering around in my swamps. But it seems a hopeless situation has arisen today. The taiga itself let you through to me." Catherine slowly turned to the shaman, meeting the gaze of her unkind black eyes like a raven's pupils. The shaman turned out to be very miniature, less than half of Catherine's height, but nevertheless looked very determined and a little hostile. "Where did you get this?" Catherine asked, pointing a finger at the second photograph. There, overgrown with a thick beard and with long hair hanging down, stood her husband. Of course, he had changed significantly in appearance, become rougher, and his gaze had become unsociable, but it was definitely him. "You will put the thing back," the old woman said sternly. "It's not yours, so there's no need to look." Catherine's lips trembled with a fine tremor, and her knees instantly went weak, turning to cotton, just like when she had tried to run away from the bandit. "I won't do anything until you tell me where you got this photo," Catherine almost shouted in the shaman's face. The woman chewed her colorless dry lips for a moment and then finally replied, "You'd better ask him that. You'll see him soon. He went after you to the city too, but you missed each other, God knows. Such is your fate." "Well, are you going to treat my child or not? Why did I call you here?" The shaman sighed heavily and then asked emphatically. Catherine seemed to awaken from a long sleep. Everything inside her was trembling. "Show me your granddaughter." The doctor finally nodded and followed the shaman into a small room, the ceiling of which was even lower than in the living room. Here, in a tiny crib, lay a small pale girl, only her cheeks burned with an unusually bright blush. "Is this Daisy?" Catherine asked, immediately getting to work. She examined the little one and stared at the shaman in horror. "Well, how is she?" "She's been ill like this for the past 3 days, and she's only getting worse. I don't understand why my potions aren't helping her." "Do you understand that your granddaughter has pneumonia?" Catherine asked loudly, her eyes flashing. "The girl needs immediate hospitalization. Thank God the local resident brought me to you. A little longer, and you would have lost the child. Do you understand that?" The shaman's face wrinkled even more, as if she had bitten into a sour apple. "Don't yell, I understand," the old woman replied submissively. "No, I'm just interested in where her mother is," Catherine asked, looking angrily at the elderly woman. "No, how could you let it get this bad? That's it. Now it's only under an IV and praying that little Daisy recovers." The child under Catherine's hands made a weak sound. "Oh my God, she's burning up," the woman said and took a syringe and an ampule of medicine from her bag. "And what's that?" "And you're going to inject her?" the shaman asked distrustfully, looking at the ampoule. Meaning, microchip my granddaughter? I won't allow it. And the shaman blocked Catherine's access to the crib. Calm down. This is a standard antipyretic used in such cases for children, Catherine replied confidently, looking her in the eyes. The old woman hesitated but still moved aside, allowing the injection to be given to her granddaughter. Now she should feel better, Catherine said and looked at the shaman. What words you know? Microchip my granddaughter. Imagine that. And how am I supposed to know what's going on in your heads, you outsiders? The shaman asked with an indignant tone. My adopted daughter, she went into the forest 3 days ago and hasn't returned. Maybe your colleagues turned her in for experiments? The next moment, large tears rolled down the shaman's eyes. Catherine realized that the woman was not entirely in her right mind, and it would be better if she took the girl with her to the hospital after all. With all these thoughts, Catherine almost forgot about the mysterious photograph she had seen in the old woman's living room. However, the next minute, the solution to this mystery appeared in person. Doctor, is she all right? A man asked with unconcealed anxiety in his voice. I was practically begging the shaman on my knees to let me call a real doctor here. Catherine carefully turned to the man, trying not to faint herself. Her lost husband stood right before her, exactly as he was in that photograph. My love, was all Catherine, pale as a sheet, could say. Tell me it's true. Is it you? Am I not imagining things? The man looked at her for a minute with a bewildered gaze, and then a spark of recognition flickered in his eyes, and then he even grabbed the door to keep from collapsing onto the floor. Memories crashed into his mind like an avalanche. Zakar, haven't you ever seen our settlement, doctor? The old woman asked, shifting her gaze from Catherine to the man and back again. Why is she calling you Daniel? Were you called that in your past life? And then the shaman looked closely at Catherine, and only after that said with dislike, So it was you he was calling for in his fever then? And I wondered why I didn't like you right away. I just felt you were connected. But I didn't think it was so closely that your thread stretched across the whole country. Catherine, my dear, it's me, Daniel. You're seeing it right, darling. How could I have forgotten everything? Despite the distance separating them, the husband took 2 wide steps towards his wife, who was crying with happiness, and squeezed her in a strong embrace. I knew it. I knew it. I knew you were alive, my love. I talked to you every night. I prayed for you. I felt that you didn't crash in the helicopter then. But who took you? The shaman and her daughter? And how did you end up here? Her husband looked at her with anxiety, but with boundless love, and then said, I'll tell you everything, I promise. But please, let's take my daughter to the hospital first. I'm very worried about her condition. Daughter? Catherine said in astonishment and recoiled from her husband. So, the shaman's daughter had a child by you? A tense silence hung between the couple for a minute, and then Catherine managed to compose herself and said somewhat dryly, Yes, you're right. A child's life is paramount. Taking the girl in his arms, the man hurried out of the hut. He easily led Catherine out of the forest thicket back to the settlement and, under the surprised gazes of the villagers, carried his daughter directly to the hospital. When the little one had received all the necessary help, and Catherine was assured that the baby's life was no longer in danger, she sank wearily onto the small sofa in her office. Can we talk? Her husband said softly as he entered. Catherine raised her eyes to him, red from worry and tears. Is there anything left for us to talk about? She asked in a colorless voice. The man carefully entered the office and locked the door behind him. Catherine, I have so much to tell you, he began, and before that I want to assure you, if I could have remembered even one day of our life together earlier, I would have immediately returned to you in the capital, honestly. The woman smiled sadly in response. Apparently you were so well off here that you didn't even have to remember anything. Nothing stirred in your soul while you were hiding with these forest sorceresses? Her husband grabbed her hands and made her look him in the face. No, Catherine, you misunderstood everything. I just couldn't remember anything, do you understand? I couldn't. And her husband began his sad story. I was carried by the blast wave right into the river. I don't really remember how it happened. I just felt a strong jolt and a few seconds of free fall and then cold and pain. When the shaman found me on the bank, I was badly injured, unconscious. She and her daughter managed to drag me to their hut, and there... The man sighed nervously. There I spent the next 6 months, practically not regaining consciousness. These women nursed me back to health. Whatever anyone says, some of their concoctions do have incredible healing power. I don't know. Maybe it was something like a coma. And only when I fully woke up, I was like a blank slate, you see? I didn't even remember my name. I didn't know who I was. Her husband rubbed the bridge of his nose as if trying to erase all the terrible things that had happened to him from his memory. Catherine listened without interrupting. She wanted to know the whole truth from him, all the way to the end. I learned to walk again. There's something wrong with my back, as I can't always keep my balance now. But it's not scary if you don't try to run too fast and don't carry too heavy loads. My daughter doesn't count, he added and lowered his eyes. The shaman's daughter was with me from the very beginning. She nursed me, fed me with a spoon. In short, brought me back to life. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. A bitter smile appeared on Catherine's face. How touching. The woman silently admitted to herself that she was tormented by jealousy. And then, I started walking again solely because I had completely lost my memory. I decided to stay here for a while until I remembered who I was and if I had a family. Naturally, I helped the women with household chores, hunted, but I did all this without leaving the forest, you understand? The shaman convinced me that I might be a fugitive criminal, and then there would surely be a wanted poster for me at the police station. I tried to explain, the husband said to his wife. And there was one, Catherine replied detachedly. Only on that poster, you were listed as missing. Catherine covered her face with her hands, unable to process all this information. My God, I looked for you for so long, and you— I'm alive, her husband replied firmly. I'm alive and sitting here trying to explain everything to you. But how do you explain the daughter? His wife brought him to the main point. Her husband looked somewhere into the distance, momentarily lost in his own thoughts. I love Sweet Daisy very much and want to take her with me when everything is over and she fully recovers. It was a moment of weakness, Catherine. You have to understand. I didn't remember anything, absolutely nothing. And the shaman's daughter was so kind to me. When she said she was pregnant, I understood that no matter what happened, I would take care of my daughter. His wife turned away. She didn't want her husband to see her face now. Only the shaman's daughter is no longer here, Catherine. What? The woman didn't understand. She's gone? Remember, the shaman said she went into the forest and hadn't been home for 3 days? Well, today I found her. What happened to her? Catherine whispered, sensing something bad. She's dead, her husband replied curtly. Oh my God, Catherine exclaimed and covered her mouth with her hands to keep from screaming. How did it happen? Her husband rubbed his palms, sweaty with fear. Catherine had never seen him so frightened. Apparently she went to gather herbs and berries, but, well, it was a bear. I only recognized her by her dress and her basket. Catherine felt her legs turn cold. And are you going to tell the shaman? Her husband just shook his head. I suspect she's already guessed. Let her think her daughter drowned in the swamp rather than learn such a terrible truth from me. They have slightly different concepts of death here. I buried the shaman's daughter right there in the forest. So the shaman, God willing, won't stumble upon her. The taiga gave, and the taiga took back. The shaman said she found her daughter as a lonely teenager who was supposedly hiding in the forest from her stepfather. So she took the girl in. Don't be angry with her, Catherine. She was truly a very good person. What? How can I now, after learning something like that about her? Catherine felt shame burning inside her. Alas, only after hearing about her death could she see in her the person who had saved her husband's life, and not a cunning temptress. Catherine, her husband asked softly, let's leave here when Daisy gets better. Shall we leave? Can you forgive me? Catherine looked into her husband's blue eyes and in that same second made the only right decision. Of course, Daniel. I'm still your wife. And so it happened. As soon as little Daisy recovered, the couple, quickly packing for the journey, were ready to take the bus to the nearest airport that same evening, from where a helicopter could take them to the mainland, and from there they could get to the capital by a regular plane. Her husband wanted to go say goodbye to the shaman when a local resident shocked him with tragic news. It turned out the old shaman had passed away the night before. Apparently she couldn't survive the loss of her daughter, the milkmaid suggested then. And her age, too. No one knew exactly how old the shaman was. Catherine, learning of the old woman's death, even shed a tear. However she felt about her and her unconventional methods of treatment, she never wished her such a fate. Don't worry, doctor, the local resident assured her. We will bury the shaman properly according to Christian custom. Catherine thanked the kind village woman and saying goodbye to everyone except the persistent paramedic, left with her husband and Daisy back to the capital. Upon returning home, their first priority was to officially adopt little Daisy and restore all her husband's documents. Catherine's parents were happy to learn that their son-in-law was, after all, alive. They held a big celebration for the occasion, and Daisy became the long-awaited granddaughter for them, arriving almost 10 years after their daughter's wedding. Her husband returned to work in the rescue service, but due to the injury he sustained, he could no longer work in the field, so he returned to where he had started. Now he consults and trains young recruits. He is now full of strength and energy and wants to make his life calmer and more constructive, dedicating most of his time to raising his daughter and his beloved wife. Catherine continued working at the clinic, returning to her previous duties. As before, she treats children, only now her own little daughter awaits her at home, whom she loves more than life and for whom she thanks God every day. Thus, having gone through a series of misfortunes and trials, the family finally found a second chance at happiness, and this time, they are not going to let it slip away.